Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder when I step out of my car and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. It is a brisk, early Thursday morning here in suburban Chicago. My daughter's swim team has started a new schedule, which means that I am taking her to practice every morning at 5:30 and waiting there until it's time to get her, or till her practice is done at 7:30. Now, I could drive home, but the pool is about 20 minutes from our house because of COVID. We're not in the pool that's near our house. And that means that I would spend an extra 40 minutes driving in order to have about an hour at home, or maybe a little longer than an hour. So instead, what I'm trying to do is just get into a rhythm where I do some work in the car while I'm waiting for practice. Now, this has some downsides. In the winter in Illinois, I have to run the car for some of that time to keep it warm. Also, it's not super easy to work in a car. So I'm still working out the kinks. But one thing that I have found during this COVID time, especially when I've got classes, is that finding time to go for my constitutional walks is a little difficult. And combine that with the desire to do podcasts, sometimes I don't have the best time to do podcasts. So it occurs to me, I could do podcasts while my daughter's out swimming, which is a return to a thing I've done before. If you have been a listener for a long time, there was a couple parts of season 1, I think, maybe season 2 as well, where I was taking walks walks through neighborhoods during a swim practice and recording my podcast then. So this is not an entirely new proposition. Nonetheless, I thought I'd give it a try, and here I am. So, what is that? Some sort of path here. I wonder where it goes. So today, and it's also really cold. It's like 15 degrees, 13 degrees Fahrenheit. It's been a minute since I've been out walking in this kind of chill. Nonetheless, if I keep my pace up, I think we'll be fine. So today, I thought that I would continue my beginning of the season conversation by thinking a little bit about what the next year of board gaming is going to look like from the perspective of games coming out. Now, it's interesting to be in this position, since one of the things I'm trying to do this year is buy fewer games, particularly not use any, budget money, just use frivolous money. And so in that regard, I'm not probably going to be buying tons of these games, but I'm sure by hook or by crook I'll try them in one way or another, assuming at some point we get to play games with other people again. I certainly didn't let COVID stop me from trying new games last year. So, in that regard, I've made a list. I went through Board Game Geek and looked at maybe the first 60 entries in the list of games coming out in 2021. And I said to myself, what games look interesting to me? So I've got two lists, and I think I'll go back and forth on it. Or no, I'm going to start with games that seem really interesting to me and that I'm keen to try. And then I also made a list of games that I think will probably be important or be part of the conversation in the board game media, and that I'm interested to see what happens with them, even if they don't sound like my kind of game. So to start with, the biggest box on the horizon is Frosthaven. Frosthaven looks like it's going to be really cool. I really enjoyed the campaign and the kinds of things that Isaac Childress, the designer, was talking about. At its heart, it's still going to be a dungeon crawl fighty game, just like Gloomhaven. But there's going to be a number of things that they do that will add to the experience. For one thing, Frosthaven is a kind of wintry outpost, and so when you're visiting, you're not visiting a built city, you're helping build the city. So there's a bit more construction going on. Apparently also there's a crafting system, so you're not buying weapons as much as you are crafting them based on creatures you kill, and you have to recover things. I hope that he loosens up the rules a little bit about recovering material, because I find the looting rules in Gloomhaven to be my least favorite part. So that's Frosthaven. Honestly, I've got sort of even money now about whether it'll actually come in 2021. I don't think it will. It's just such a very complicated build, and they haven't even closed the pledge manager yet. So yeah, I don't think we'll see it this year. Second game I'm interested in, and this almost fell in the I want to see what happens with it, but I do want to try it, is Ankh. Ankh is the next game from Eric Lang and Simon in the, I guess you'd call it the Blood Rage trilogy. First he did Blood Rage, then he did, Rising Sun, and now Ankh is the third one that's coming. I'm interested to see what happens with that game. I know that a lot of people went in and backed it. I did not. So the biggest thing against me playing it is that I didn't back it. So who knows? And the people that I tend to play that kind of game with, I don't play games with because COVID. Nonetheless, those games have the Ankh and Rising Sun and Blood Rage. They're all really interesting, and they've made a good impact on the board game landscape. And so I'm keen to see what happens with Ankh and try it if I get a chance. Whew. Did I mention it's cold? Yowza! All right, the next game I wanted to talk about is Sleeping Gods. This is the new one from Ryan Lockett. I did not get a chance to try Near and Far yet, but I really enjoyed Above and Below, and I've enjoyed Islebound, and so anything Ryan Lockett does is certainly going to get a view from me. And so, yeah, I'm interested to see what happens with that one. It's got you're like a fishing boat, and I believe you encounter some sort of big underwater Cthulhu type. Next up, we've got Perseverance. Oh, I'm excited for this one. I really like Mind Clash games, as you know. If you listen to this podcast, I'm a bit of a Mind Clash fanboy. And Perseverance kind of returns the team that made Anachrony, which is probably my favorite of the Mind Clash games. David Turkey's design sensibility works pretty well for me most of the time, especially when it's combined with the narrative sensibility and opulent game design of the Mind Clash team, particularly Victor Peter and Richard Amon, although there's a whole group of them. Perseverance, if you didn't see it, it is a kind of a worker placement civilization building game with a really complicated narrative that involves a cruise ship and interdimensional travel and an island full of dinosaurs for some reason. The innovative thing they've done with Perseverance is they made 2 games out of it. The first game is about when the ship first lands and trying to establish the initial colony. And then the second episode is about once the colony's been established, trying to explore the island a bit more. They're interrelated games, and I believe there is a connector element where you can play one game and then take elements from the first game into the second one. But they're standalone games. The way they've marketed it is the first 2 games are sort of in this box, if you bought both, where you get this one box with like 2 drawers and then like tons of really nice components. I wouldn't be surprised if this game does not come out this year. It's a very complicated production, and the Anachrony delivery and the Tricarian delivery were both late. I mean, the products turned out great. I think they're spending enough time on things that they need to, but yeah, they came late. Okay, I've sort of given up the ghost on the weather. It is really flippin' cold, so I'm heading back to my van. And if I haven't had my, hey, you've been talking for 20 minutes timer go off yet, I'm going to sit in the van and I'll talk to you not walking for the first time in the history of the podcast. Yikes. Okay, next game I'm interested in. Oh, Merchants of the Dark Road. This is one I almost backed. It sounds really neat. I think it's a worker placement tableau building game. But there's this interesting element of a board that you travel, and you have these merchant caravans, and you gain things by, I don't know, moving through the land. The thing that interested me about it was, I don't remember who the designer is, but the design pedigree sounded pretty good. The mechanisms looked interesting. And there was this element of wait and see that I thought was pretty cool, because you can join someone else's caravan when they're going out. And I think they get a bit more bonus than you do, but there's an interesting element where you can kind of glom onto they do all this work to organize the caravan, and then you just join it at the last minute. Sounds pretty interesting, although I'm not sure it sounds like a game for me. So I don't know why I put it in the game for me category. Mostly because I'm pretty interested in it. This next one sounds so fascinating, I might have to buy it just out of respect for the ambition of the design. This is So You've Been Eaten. It's ostensibly a 1 or 2 player game by Scott Alms, in which you play either an astronaut doing some mining or an interstellar space creature. And I guess the way the game works is the interstellar space creature has really important or valuable things in its gullet, and your job is to get into that space creature and mine those things and then you have to get out before you get digested. It's unclear to me how you get in and out. I hope the game does make that clear, because that's a fun idea. But the overall move of it is pretty interesting. Also, it's a 2-player game where one person is the creature, one person is the miner. But I understand that it's also a 1-player game where you can play one side or the other. There must be some sort of automa. Or, this is the weirdest part, and the thing that actually I think got the game a lot of press, it has a 0-player mode as well somehow, which I don't understand at all. What the flip is a 0-player mode, and how would that work? So yeah, that's interesting. I am in my car now. Excuse the noises. And I'm not walking. I know it will be weird to listen to me talking without hearing thump, thump, thump of my feet and crunch, crunch, crunch of the snow. But boy, howdy, it is cold today. So I am breaking my normal rule. We'll see this. I may have to wait until it's a little warmer to do this on the regular. Yeah, my car says it's 11 degrees out right now, which, the part of me that grew up in Minnesota would be ashamed that I got chased back in by an 11-degree thing. But I'm not really dressed for the weather. I mean, I brought my good coat and I have a hat and mittens, and a scarf, but only one pair of pants and no boots. So anyway, the next game that I'm interested in is Golem. This looks really interesting. It's unclear to me what it is. I think you are, in Prague or a city like that, and it's medieval times, and you're building a golem, and I don't know, using it to do stuff. Mostly, I'm attracted by the theme, the idea of a game set around the idea of making golems. That's cool. And the design team, which is Simone Luciani and a couple other people. His is the name I know best. I know that Daniele Tassini is not involved, although it does seem to be a lot of the same people from that circle. It's apparently the same design team that made Grand Austria Hotel, and that's the inspiration for this game. So it's going to use some of the same mechanisms, which I'm excited about. I've heard lots of good things about that. I'm currently playing a game of it on Board Game Arena, which I'm sure I'll mention at some point in the future. But yeah, it seems like Golem will be a really interesting addition to the board game landscape, and I'm excited to see what happens. And then the last thing that's scheduled for 2021 release that I'm excited about, although I don't know how excited I can say I am since I did not participate in the Kickstarter for it, is the Stronghold Undead expansion. Now, I really like Stronghold. It is a cool game that I've only played twice, I think, but I really like it. And every time I think about, should I get rid of it, the potential for fun play of it in future holds me back. But the expansion, I guess in the original edition of Stronghold, there was an expansion. There was an undead expansion where an undead army comes and menaces the Stronghold. And then finally, last year, Portal Games had a Kickstarter for the undead expansion. I did not join in on that. It was pretty expensive. Did they make it a standalone game? It was very expensive. More expensive than I was willing to pay. But when it comes out in retail, I may change my mind or at least want to check it out because I really like the game. I think the thing that kept me from backing it originally on Kickstarter was the fact that I've hardly ever played the original, even though I haven't, and I really enjoy it. So that's Stronghold, the Undead expansion from Portal Games. All right, very quickly, as I'm wrapping up my podcast here, I do have a couple comments about other games that look like they will be exciting and interesting on the landscape here, and I'm keen to see what you think. The first of these is Carnegie. It's on Kickstarter right now, which means it probably won't be out this year if the usual timelines hold. It could be out toward the end of the year, or even faster if the Kickstarter company, if Quind Games is really fast about it. And it seems like it's mostly done, in which case maybe they have all the files ready to go, in which case maybe it'll go into production right after Chinese New Year. So it could certainly be out this year. It seems likely. This is a game that's getting a lot of positive buzz, and honestly, it sounds like it'd be really fun if it weren't themed around Andrew Carnegie, who was a pretty vicious industrialist, and I just don't want to play a game modeled on him. I presume you're playing somebody at the same time. I don't know. The theme turns me off. As much as I love games about sort of economic development, like Brass is one of my favorites, I'm less and less excited to play more games from that theme. I feel like there's so many different things we could be doing. We don't need to keep celebrating rapacious capitalism. But anyway, that's Carnegie, a game that I'm sure will make some buzz. Another game due out this year that will probably make a lot of noise is Return to Dark Tower. I know this game got a ton of backing on Kickstarter. I did not back it. It isn't a game that I had any affection for. And while it does look neat, it didn't look neat enough to really drive me to it. It looks like it's going to be, Restoration Games does a great job. It's got this really cool tower in the middle of the board, which is, the case with the original game as well. But now it sounds like they've come up with some neat developments to make it even better. There's some mechanical bits, and you do stuff with your phone, I think, to run it. And it just looks really neat. I think you use your phone. So that's Return to Dark Tower, coming from Renegade Games. I believe Isaac Childress was also heavily involved, along with Rob Davio, in the redesign. Another game due out this year that I think will probably make a lot of noise is Oath. This is kind of Cole Worley and Leader Games follow-up to Root. They hired Kyle Farron again to do the art. Reading the description on Board Game Geek, it does look like it's in the neighborhood of Root, although the rulebook doesn't say anything about asymmetry, or the description on Board Game Geek doesn't say anything about asymmetry. Instead, they talk about it as a campaign or legacy game, which, is a different set of concerns, but equally exciting. I think there's a lot of fun stuff to watch here. Root wasn't really for me, although I acknowledge it was a good game, and I've enjoyed my plays of it, I guess, but not really my favorite. So I'm interested to see what happens with Oath, although, again, this list of games are things that I'm keen to see what happens, but I don't have any arrangements or plans to play them. Another one is Role Player Adventures. This is an expansion on the Role Player world, kind of a dungeon crawl game, I understand. I think the other one, Role Player Minions and Monsters expansion, did draw on the original Role Player game. Like, you could play Role Player and then take the character that you had created and then do adventures with it. I don't know. I don't think that's what's happening in Role Player Adventures. I think this one is a little something else. Hold on. I don't know if Role Player Adventures does the same thing where it draws on the characters you create in Role Player, or if it just is a separate thing like Gloomhaven or something. But I'm keen to find out. I really like what they're doing over at Thunderworks, and I'm sure it will be great. All right, 3 more games quick to mention. I'm hearing a lot of buzz, or hearing a lot of podcasters talk about the game Cubitos, which might be successful influencer interacting from AEG more than actual quality game. Hard to say. It's from designer John D. Clare, the person well known for the card crafting systems in Mystic Vale, and for the game Space Base, which is very different. He also did, I think, one called Edge of Darkness, which looked really neat and also had card crafting, but I haven't tried any of those except Space Base and Mystic Vale. But anyway, Cubitos, I've heard several podcasters talking about how really good it is and how they're excited to play it in the coming year. There's going to be a new card game built around Vampire the Masquerade. I don't particularly care about Vampire the Masquerade as a role-playing game, but it was one of my favorite card games for a very long time. It's a collectible card game in its original form, and I played it quite a bit. The new version, Vampire the Masquerade something, is a new card game. I did not back it on Kickstarter. It looked expensive, and that part of me was sort of like, I like the original game so much, I don't want to go back unless it's really good. So we'll see. That's another one. I'm keen to see how it's reviewed. And then finally, the last one that I guess I'm just cheering for because I have a soft spot for David Turksey, is the Defense of Procyon 4, or whatever it's called. They did a Kickstarter for it last year, and it's due out this year. It's a asymmetric war game with a wacky theme and a wacky name. So best of luck to David Turksey on that. I'm interested to see what happens as the Kickstarter finishes. So those are the games that I saw in my brief review of the 2021 projected publication market that I'm excited to see in the coming year. Seems like fully a third of the ones that I am really excited about probably won't actually come out in 2021, but we'll see. Maybe they will. I'll be surprised, perhaps. Well, thanks for joining me on Pick Up and Deliver today. Sorry about the strange situation of me sitting in a car to do the last half of the podcast, but boy, it was cold. Boy. I will talk to you again in a little bit. I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Thanks for joining me. Bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.